trying to get Mark on stage, but let's reserve a seat for him and kick off the discussion. There's plenty to discuss here, so.
Yeah.
All right.
Will I kick it off?
Yeah, you can maybe, do you want to introduce yourself quickly, because you haven't been around in the morning?
I guess we all should introduce again, because I'm not sure who here was here the whole day. All right. So I was here in the morning. I'm Robert from 1KX, early stage venture fund. So I'm taking the investor perspective a little bit on this topic. But yeah, maybe you guys can also quickly introduce again for those who haven't been around.
I'm Angela. I founded Token Engineering Academy, and we ran the first token engineering track at ECC 3 years ago. It's the third time, or 2 years ago then. And our goal was always to establish crypto economics, token engineering rigor in designing token-based systems. And this has been our mission since then. And I'm happy to have great allies here from both sides, practitioners and research, to organize TERSE and get this to the next level.
Hi, I'm Chris from Token Engineering Labs. I'm also with the Crypto Econ Institute at the Vienna University of Economics. And I'm working in the token engineering space for almost 8 years now. And the approach that I'm taking personally is this synthesis between research, applied prototyping, and basically trying and modeling to arrive at a solution that is really stable and functioning. So the conversations that we're having here very much feed into the methodology of work that we're doing, and I very much appreciate that we can have this discourse.
Yeah, that's also how I ended up, because I met Chris in medical academia, and then we worked together, like also on the startup side. So like I'm part-time in academia in the blockchain center of the University of Zurich, where we research from the law aspect up to the regulation, to technology, to the economic impact of these blockchain-based systems. So we have quite a diverse group of people doing research there, which I'm representing here. And I find this discussion very valuable, and hence I'm very happy to be here.
All right, yeah. I mean, we put this panel a little bit under a provocative question, like what happens when research gets crowded out by hype? And the context is a little bit, right, I mean, we all know crypto moves fast, move fast, break things, but the rigor often lags the, behind this narrative. And then what happens, I mean, we all see this, right? Not only have you boom bust on hype, but then even kind of like mechanics where this must break, right? The most prominent example is, Terra stablecoin. Like everybody who knows mechanism design saw it coming, because there was no way this not gonna end bad, right? But as seen today in the talks, TERSE, the token engineering research symposium, exists to create a research-first, non-promotional space. And to explore our question, I want to start with Angela. You founded the Academy, as you just said. You built out the token engineering community for years, right? You actually kicked off this symposium. So the question to you, what gap did you see that made TERSE necessary for you now?
So I would like to start earlier when what gap did we see in token engineering, because it's so simple. I mean, in the blockchain space, very different dynamics come together to form an economic systems. It's like the fascination about blockchain systems and what we can do with this permissionless systems, ownership, sensor resistance. Then we have the startup spirit in okay, let's break things and move fast, and also this uncertainty. So it's very hard to design things from scratch. You can't plan for success. You have to use the momentum. And then we have this, okay, but we are in fact launching and trying to steer and make successful very complex systems. And this was for us in the beginning, and still is, I'd say, a huge motivation, because it's hard and hard is fun I would say the initial starting point was we have great ingredients and disciplines and knowledge we can draw from, but we have to combine it in a new way to tackle this huge range of challenges we see and also the dynamics in the blockchain space. And I think that's still visible here. If you're looking at the agenda, people from very different disciplines are tackling problems in the blockchain space from different angles. And I found it even interesting for some speakers, like I think Stefan Lösch showed this journey in exploring how can we tackle this problem, and you found new ways. And this is exciting. And I think it's this, we have a huge chunk of intrinsic motivation in our community. And I think a growing body of knowledge, how economics, game theory, modeling and simulations can be applied to the blockchain space. And it has been a very exciting journey.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, maybe to go to Mark here, because you just presented your research, and you are publishing regularly, right? So for sure the researcher here in the group. Maybe coming back to the hype versus like fundamental research questions. Do you actually, when are going out for your research, feel impacted by the hype and narratives? Right, when it comes to scoping your research, but also, yeah, how do you view the gap basically between kind of like academic research and what gets discussed and implemented in protocols, basically, right? So that's practitioner academic gap, basically.
Yeah, I mean, like a sensitive question. In the end, I mean, for the research I presented, I would argue it's a bit more fundamental. So in the sense of it's driven less by hype, like. But the problem is always then the rewards are not that immediate. So in some sense, so like you need to find this sweet spot where you connect to maybe interesting things which other people are already doing. If you do it too much alone, like academic terms, you're not getting that much more momentum in some sense. And I just recently got more interest in this work. So like I think there's like value in this, and there's also value in hype topics, I believe. So like and I would say the interesting thing is that there's also hype in research and there's hype in industry, and they don't necessarily need to overlap. So like it can be quite disconnected. I think what we're trying to do is maybe get some interesting things maybe overlapping. And I think like what I like to do is like kind of these different hypes to play with it, like because like hype in research can help you to publish something, to have like talking points for industry, to maybe change something fundamentally more in industry. On the other hand, industry is sometimes quicker or discover something new, so like you can kind of take successful hype topics to push forward your own topic in academia. And in this sense, makes sense to also stay in these hype topics and publish in these domains. So I think they can help each other. And the second part of the question, how much it's applied, yeah, or like.
Yeah, kind of like also as a follow-up, because you're also kind of like supporting protocols, so you have both viewpoints, right?
Yes, and I mean, yeah, like so I think that's, I mean, it's leading to why we are here. I do think that like in both sides there's so much value. I mean, also so many shortcomings, but let's focus on the values and yeah, I mean, I see it, for example, from this DAO perspective, yeah? So like in DAOs, they're like, you have like the research community, but there's also like very split. Like you have like the DAO researchers, and then you have like, political scientists. We also saw like from Kleos, we like to take like social choice theory and voting. So these communities, they have different topics they are working on. And when I see in like in the context of DAOs, we're all in the industry, but also in the DAO research, we focus kind of on voting, but not enough on deliberation, or maybe even in as later like in conflict resolution. So like these aspects are heavily underdeveloped. And in this sense, academia has solutions for this. Like there are like researchers really focus on deliberation and everything like since years already. And there's like kind of crypto totally ignorant. Like we believe like, I don't know, like improvement proposals on GitHub are good enough or something like this. So there's more. On the other hand, I think like the innovation with different voting mechanisms per se in crypto, like a lot of people in academia are just overlooking it. Optimistic governance we heard today, and like these things could be studied much more, or taken up by researchers. So I think there's like a lack on both ends, but there's also, I mean, there are individuals pushing on both ends, and I think also this group here. So I'm quite optimistic. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, Chris, you want to add something because you also basically cover all ranges of like protocol support, research, academia.
Yeah, so totally. I think so. It is a reframing problem actually, or a reframing conversations, because all of this already exists in like those isolated silos or isolated worlds. So you have the academic space where you have been deliberating on problems for hundreds of years. At the same time, crypto is existing, is building, and people are talking about the same problem, but they're using different jargon, they're using different vocabulary. So obviously they do not understand each other, or do not even understand that they're talking about the same thing. So you can approach the thing top down or bottom up. So you can say, let's try to establish crypto in academia, or you can say, let's try to get people in crypto look more at what has been happening in academia. And both solutions are valid. And I think that the space of token engineering has been maturing for the last couple of years. And we are now at the intersection where we actually can synthesize those approaches. So we really are mature enough to now have a conversation here on topics with experts from both fields. And they would actually acknowledge that, yes, this is a problem that we are both talking about. And yes, there are solutions, or there are approaches that we can leverage in this particular blockchain use case. So it's not anymore a problem of translation, it's more a problem of synthesis. This is where we stand right now. And this is what we try to approach. So I want to end this with like another note, which is there is a distinction between multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary research. And I think that this is very important. So multidisciplinary is if you are capable of going into multiple directions and you can talk about these things using different methodology or apply different methods to solve the problem. Interdisciplinary research is when you carry over solutions or methods from one discipline into another. And I think that we are entering this stage right now. So we are entering the stage where we as a community will start working interdisciplinary to synthesize those things.
Yeah, that's good. And yeah, now we also have Mark on stage, another Mark. And yeah, maybe also you can quickly introduce yourself, but also the question for you, you elaborated even in a blog post, your motivation, why you support the TERSE program. And yeah, maybe you can share from there what your observations are, you know, as a builder, as a frequent conference participant, you know, when it comes to exchange of ideas and the presentation or like discussion of research, right?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm sorry I was late for the panel. My name is Mark Richardson. I'm the project lead at Bancor since October of 2022. Before the pandemic, I was an organic synthetic chemist, and so I was on the sort of tenure track career path, which got thoroughly interrupted by the pandemic, which is when I made the switch to blockchain. I only bring that up because I have been well trained, right, in the traditional, let's say, academic caliber of what it requires to make a claim and support it, and bring that into the scientific record. And it's prohibitively high for a good reason. And I think that with respect to hype, and one of the things that Mark brought up was that even in research there's hype, and that's certainly true. Like when I was early in my PhD career, things like olefin metathesis and palladium catalyzed chemistry was like all the rage. And there was like this hype effect where if you were applying for grants, you kind of want to apply for things that are trending with funding agencies as well, right? And governments will usually prescribe things for you that are that they consider important, even if they're not important, you know? And I think in crypto and in blockchain mechanism design and protocol design and consensus mechanisms, you actually have some version of the same deliberately introduced bias, right, into these things. When there is, you know, like at the moment, privacy, obviously privacy is super important, but it is also hypey at the moment, right? Like these things get some time in the spotlight, and if you happen to be offering privacy technology or focusing on privacy technology, now is a really great time to come to blockchains with grant proposals and things like that. But you know, think about all the things that you remember from the cycles through crypto that have had that same time in the limelight, right? Before privacy, there might have been things like futures contracts all of a sudden were all the rage, and to some extent still are, but diminishingly so. And then before that was betting markets, right? And maybe these things came together. And you can keep going back, right? I remember sort of the Olympus DAO and all the Olympus DAO forks, and prior to that, like anything to do with DeFi in general, but specifically on bonding codes was all the rage. And before that, there was NFTs, and you know what I mean? Like these things keep coming up. And they spend their time, you know, as movie of the week. And then most of that stuff disappears. Even if something happened there that was worth holding on to. And I think that is that is worth recognizing, that within that hype bubble, there actually are people that accidentally got swept into it, right? That were doing legitimately cool stuff and that should be recognized and remembered. And I think that the only way to tease out those gems, right, of actual new knowledge that occurred is to have something like this, right? To have a filter where people who are qualified to speak on certain topics get found through some sort of process. Because otherwise, you know, it's very, especially in today, you know, in the environment that we have today, it's very, very easy to fake erudition on a topic, especially if you're being asked to prepare pages and things. ChatGPT can do this for you now with like amazing conviction, and it gets very, very difficult to, I think, tease apart, you know, who is actually knowledgeable on certain topics and who isn't. And the only thing that can do that, I think, is rigor and friction, right? It's not just what someone sounds like when they prepare a blog or something like that, but how they respond to questions when they're, you know, you can see if they're consulting GPT, you know, to work out what the answer is. But then I think also in terms of lessons learned, right? So there are like great technological concepts that emerge from these paradigms, but then there are also like really dangerous ideas that we need to hold on to and remember why they're dangerous. And I don't know if it's like every generation needs to learn the same lessons, because apparently that they do. But things like, you know, liquidity mining rewards and how unsustainable that is. And, you know, even things like UST from Terra Luna and the Anchor incident. When I was reading about how people were thinking about how to diagnose that problem, it turns out that it's based on an old scheme from the stock markets. Like, it wasn't even the first time this had happened in history, maybe the first time in crypto, but it wasn't even the first time in crypto, right? And so there is like even, I think, a need for a well-curated historical record, right, of what's real and what's not, and what's a good idea and what isn't. And the only way you can do that is via an academic process, right? And that informs both the research and the development aspects of what we do.
Okay, yeah. I mean, already a good step towards the next point about like what TERSE, you know, aims to solve and also how. Yeah, I like the both aspect, right? The positive and the negative of hype. Maybe also the question for the other ones, right? Because it always sounds quite negative of like, oh yeah, hype is crowding out the research. But you were indicating also some positive examples of like, yeah, it can also attract talent, for example. Yeah, maybe do you guys have other positive examples where, you know, hype can actually be useful, for example, for coordination in that sense?
Like obviously funding, I guess, because
oh yeah, the researchers.
Research funding. So Obviously, if there is interest, if there's venture interest, funding comes along, and then this helps to make progress. I mean, albeit we are in the midst of a bear market, I believe that there is kind of like a floor of builders or researchers sticking to the space. They keep working. So you can basically measure how much intrinsic value there still exists in the space based on kind of like the people who keep working, even if they're in different times right now.
And I must say, I mean, I'm looking at it mostly from the field of governance, now head of governance at NEAR, and also managing, trying to tackle most up-to-date challenges in governance and in protocol design. And of course, this is at a very high speed. Sometimes I wish I had the time to discuss a certain problem with researchers, but many times I have to make a decision on something before I even have the chance to raise the question to researchers. So this is the speed we are talking about. It's not about weeks, it's sometimes about days and sometimes about hours. And this can make a whole research topic go away or suddenly get into the focus of attention. And this is certainly something any practitioner and anyone interested in, let's say, rigor in the crypto sector is struggling with. Probably not only in crypto, but this is definitely a huge challenge. So I wouldn't even say no one is interested in rigor. It's rather things are moving so fast. But then there is also a positive side of hype. I mean, we started in 2018 and there have been numerous concepts. We had curation markets today, a long list of primitives that have been developed due to hype, basically. And these primitives wouldn't exist if not between, I don't know, March and June, everybody was talking about the same thing. And then it disappeared, but the primitive stayed. And I think this is something also the whole governance sector, if it comes to governance in permissionless systems, in pseudonymous systems, how can we secure such systems? How can we make good decisions now adding AI on top? I must say, in this respect, I don't even care about hype, because at some point, questions get surfaced and addressed by people who would probably never met each other or never ask these questions without the hype. And if we are lucky, primitives stay, insights stay, and we can pick them up in a ever-growing body of knowledge. And this is the positive side, and sometimes I'm much more frustrated about the moments I cannot dive deeper, but then also I think we can look at a valuable body of knowledge created in crypto that might be relevant again in a different context. It's there and it's available, and that's great.
I think as well, it's important to recognize that hype is something that just happens, right? I think that people assume, and sometimes it's at least partially true, but I think it's got more to do with luck, that hype is something that's like engineered, right? I promise you, there isn't a marketing, advertising campaign or agency in the world that can bring hype to a subject, right? It's something that is just emergent in a population. And I think it's an early indication of how interesting a topic material is to a big community, right? To like the masses. And there are, consulting firms that have characterized this. I think it's called the Gartner hype cycle, right? Where like as soon as there's a new technology, you get this kind of immediate increase in attention that absolutely exceeds, the level of maturity that technology has. When I first learned about this, it was actually being critical of nanotechnology research, where I remember in high school, people were like, there's going to be like micro-scale computers and that kind of thing, meaning like whole devices that are that are compiled from just a few dozen atoms, which is of course insane. But that was the kind of thing that you would see in like Wired magazine or New Scientist or something like that. And of course, none of that was true, and then nanotechnology fell off a cliff. I think, though, that the reason why some of the miniaturization that we have today is largely because of the people that were inspired like during that wave of new attention. That it does bring in, it casts a very wide net, and from that wide net, you actually do stick some people to it that end up making a career and actually advancing the field in a significant way. And I think crypto is entirely that, right? Like, if it wasn't for the hype of the Ethereum launch, like, we wouldn't be discussing this right now on this stage, right? There wouldn't be an international conference in Cannes, let alone one that's been running for 9 consecutive years. In Bitcoin, to some extent, right? That first, in a way, you can measure the hype peak of Bitcoin with its price, and that does bring people in. And at least in cryptography, that there are people today that know about things like hashing algorithms and elliptic curves and that kind of thing, that only know about these things because they were interested in whether or not the Bitcoin protocol actually does what it says it does. And I think that that's beneficial, right? It does raise awareness, and it does bring in new talent and that sort of thing. But it takes time, and it's not something that you should aim for. Like, what I'm saying is the hype just happens, and that's kind of the mass social psychology mechanism just doing whatever it does, the hive mind of humanity, if you like. And during that process, right, is when people become activated and then join in a certain industry and so on. So I do think that that's positive.
And maybe just to add to that, so I mean, the beauty of research is that it is cumulative, in the sense that it's independent of the hype. So, for example, if there was a hype 30 years ago about the voting systems, like, some progress has been made on this topic, then it has been stored in archives, and then today, if there is attention on the same topic but in a different use case, people can just pick it up and build on top of that. So, I mean, what we're trying to do is basically just making sure that the common denominator as an output, exists and can be then stored for future value.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue even within crypto, right? You mentioned betting markets as one earlier hype. Now we have, the prediction markets picking back up from there. And yeah, if I aggregate this, then yeah, basically the hype cycles are good in the sense we get a wider net of talent. Just, programs like TERSE need to make sure that we condense the knowledge so that we generate this cumulative basis to go on from there. And yeah, maybe with that outlook, maybe at you, Angela, this was the first symposium today. And we have seen great talks, lots of knowledge sharing, very different directions, very different research fields. What do you see next from TERSE? And also the question to the other guys, if you can make a wish for the symposium or token engineering space in general for the next year or years, what would that be?
We just started this conversation over lunch, and I must say there's a lot to process. So let's live brainstorm what should be next for TERSE. I'd say I think this building, let's say, a channel or a format to have an ongoing conversation between practitioners and research is still something I feel it's not there yet, and even such a great day with amazing talks is not exactly what I'm looking for, because as I mentioned, challenges pop up at a certain speed and also volatility of attention, that it's hard to have the right knowledge or the right conversation at any point in time. So it would be helpful to just have access to, be able to share practitioners' question easily, because I think this can be very inspirational for researchers. While at the same time, it's sometimes frustrating. You're working for a year on a certain research topic and see the hype gone once you're ready to publish. I think validating against where's the space moving or what are practitioners thinking about a certain topic is always relevant and helpful to not stay in a researcher's bubble. While vice versa, for practitioners and people around me that I'm having conversations with what should be next in a protocol or for a certain decision-making new paradigm we are trying to develop, it can be quite helpful to inform or have an ongoing conversation to establish rigor, because I always felt rigor is not something that you establish it over time. So this level of quality, this level of references you can make, and this is not something that I feel that in a team or in a certain community you can switch on once you need rigor and you switch it off once you'd like to have speed. It's rather something that has to be an ongoing practice, and sometimes you have to acknowledge and accept that you can't apply the level of rigor you would love to apply, but this can be a conscious decision, right? But what we are aiming for is, in fact, that this is a conscious decision, and not by accident you just miss all the work and on all the proofs that have been made about a certain situation or problem. And so an ongoing exchange between practitioners and research to further increase the level of rigor. This is something I would love to see for TERSE.
Yeah, I mean, there's immediately next, we need to compile all of the manuscripts that we received, and we've given ourselves a soft deadline that I'm not going to make public. But there will be a proceedings of TERSE at Cannes 2026, and I would like to see that idea evolve over time. Whether if we have to shoulder it ourselves, so be it. But I think this is an enormous burden. But I'm really sick of this feeling that I get when I might sit down with someone and they're like, "Did you see such and such a thing?" Right? And it's getting increasingly difficult with the many thousands of projects that there are to remain abreast of what development looks like and where the new ideas are. I think it's really beyond due to have something like a peer-reviewed journal where people can either post abstracts for what their protocol is and does and specifics about how it works, so that there is a kind of newspaper, right, in crypto for protocol mechanisms and that sort of thing. And I think that there's an appetite for it. And it's been really great to, I've been spending a lot of time in Switzerland recently, and EPFL has its own blockchain research center, and UZH, which is supporting TERSE here today, has its own research center. The IEEE in Austria has its own blockchain division. It's not like the institutions in academia aren't already there. There just needs to be some forum where this is correctly organized, and that makes it. We also need to make it approachable, because I think for a lot of projects, publishing an academic paper is like the least prioritous thing, right? Especially if you're in startup mode or something like that. But to sort of introduce this culture of rigor, and I think that this is what Angela was speaking to. I would like to see how that develops, and I think that the first step, right, a kind of market test, if you like, is going to be how the proceedings is received. But I think that could continue as well.
Yeah. Any more wishes, outlooks?
I mean, I'll make it quick, but I think also this format here is kind of capacity building, in the end, because I think in the end you always really need to take the decision, so you can always consult, but in the end it will be you. And I think just preparing for times where one needs to be quick, I think this format's quite nice because we have time now, and instead of listening to sales pitches, we're sitting here, so kind of giving this alternative for like collective capacity building. And then I think as a concrete next step, I also think like kind of what I very much like, you're very open, like in inviting researchers also to come here, like to this group. Another step might be to step out and go to an academic conference, which is there, like, and have a workshop there. So we are briefly discussing it, and this might be something like kind of showing the beauty we had here today, like with like a lot of good submissions in a more academic setup. Maybe we want to adjust us a little bit to the narrative, which is then at this conference there, wherever one goes, and then like a dialogue could start, I think.
For me, I mean, we've been talking about research the whole day today, but tomorrow we will be actually doing research. Like the next step is to kind of get into the room and apply the practice actively, which is what everyone invite to do tomorrow with us. So like starting from 2 p.m. in one of the floor rooms on the 3rd or 4th floor, but you can find it on the breakout session agenda and also on the main event agenda. We have the token engineering breakout session where we invite you everyone to participate and kind of like do this together or like apply this methodology in practice. This is one thing that I would really much see as one of the immediate next steps. And also just to make sure that we are building something that makes sense, because I mean, there is a lot of push from the regulatory side on making sure that systems that are being deployed are compliant and are being, distributed to the public in a way where like they are safe, regulatory. But I think that we should also do those things technically or academically. So like we would want to establish a standard where the systems that we deploy, they are basically validated. And I think that we should have the ambition to reach a level where we can say, okay, this has been approved by experts, or like this is a valid mechanism, or this has been rigorously tested. And yeah, this is what I see as the next steps for the community.
Oh, Robert.
My next steps? I mean, I pretty much second what Chris just said, right? Because from the investor's perspective, this is for sure, I mean, VCs or retail investors, whatever investor cap hat you want to put on, but this is one of the most lagging parts over the last years where we moved fast, we break things, but typically the price was paid by the people who bought the tokens, basically, right? And invested in these mechanisms. And this is the issue there that, yes, right, rigor takes time to catch up and to validate things, but I guess this is like the process and the point of maturity where we are right now. You have protocols and you have mechanisms out there where you know, okay, this has been validated, this is verified. It just needs more stages or, I don't know how you call it, but symposiums like this where you know, okay, I can go there, be it in the journal or wherever, I can see what has been validated, what's not. Because yeah, this is the bread and butter of working as sort of like an economics person in a VC setup, that you need to go around and say like, okay, does that make sense? Is it a scam? Can that work? Because it's all new ideas often, right? So you always look like, okay, what has been explored in the past and all that. So it's pretty much to your point, right? Then you go and look out, and you don't have a month to do this, you have days to make the decision because the team is raising and so on and so forth. So that's why I very much support this initiative to push this forward as well, because yeah, it's for sure something that is not there enough, right? We have these, but it's not enough for the space. And it's also, if we have a space want to mature, then this will be demanded because no serious, larger investor comes in and says like, oh yeah, you have an ICO white paper, of course, yeah. I'm gonna spend all my money here that I have fiduciary duty to basically invest for a pension fund or whatever. So that's that point. And yeah, and maybe since we have a couple of minutes left, for questions from the audience, but maybe also for the participants today or just general audience or token engineers in the crowd, what would you like to see from a program like TERSE? Too much pressure, I guess.
It's off to lunch, everyone.
Hey, I just wanted to express support for the journal where new ideas are published. I thought that was a really good idea.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I agree. I've been waiting for someone to kind of do it. And, you know, I've seen like Springer and Elsevier, they've kind of got like blockchain themed kind of stuff. And there's, you know, but it's not quite right. You know, like it's like too financial, or I don't know, a little bit navel-gazy or something. It's not really like you know, a report of what's happened, and or you know, it's like deeply theoretical, which is fine. Like obviously I find that stuff very appealing, but sometimes I just want someone to say, this is the idea, this is why I think it works, on sort of like a bulletin, and you know, to have a sort of call for questions or criticism, the same way that like letters to an editor used to work, you know. But yeah, I'm glad that we've got a second voice that says that they would find that appealing. I also hope we get to do this again.
There's one more.
Thank you for all the sessions, and I have a question. Unfortunately, I can't go to tomorrow's hands-on session. So, like, I'm curious what kind of methodology you will we will try to use, and like, I wonder if the session is like live streamed.
Yeah, so answer to the second question first, unfortunately not. So like the breakout sessions are typically not recorded, but we will write a report about it. So like we will share insights after the fact. And to your first question, it really depends on the problem framing and the team working on the problem. So as I mentioned before, it's more a multidisciplinary approach. So the first step is to define the problem. The second is to check in the toolbox of methodologies what is the appropriate setup or the appropriate approach to tackle this problem, and then go to first principles thinking and try to arrive at a solution, or at least a plan to come up with a solution in further research. So we will see tomorrow what happens. Some of the problems defined are more narrow and more concrete, so we would expect real solutions to be derived within 3 hours. But for some problems that we have, we might end up defining a formulation that we will explore for several months afterwards. So it's basically we will see, and we will see when we get there type of thing.
Okay, thank you. Later, I want to ask more details.
Sure.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, regarding the research that you do with AI and the slope that it generates, I wanted to understand what is your most grueling pains when you do research, rigor research that takes a long time. What is the thing that takes most of your time that you would like to automate, actually using automation frameworks?
There are some things that I do where I know that for example, the algebra is going to be very easy, but tedious, right? And it used to be that I would use, I found this really amazing package back in 2020 called SymPy for Python. I'm sure if there are any mathematicians in the room, they know what I'm talking about. And it's basically just a really convenient way to do tedious tasks in mathematics. And it seems, at least to me, that ChatGPT and Claude and everything else already knows about SymPy, and so it does that kind of stuff automatically. And so for a really tedious but basic, process in like mathematical research, I find some of those AI tools to be exceedingly useful at, shrinking down to 5 minutes of prompt to, from what would usually take me like an hour or 2 hours or something like that manually. So that's the kind of stuff where I'm very happy to automate, right? Things where there's literally no intellectual nourishment in performing that exercise, other than maybe proving to yourself that you still know, how logarithms work or something like that. But when you have when you're doing sort of deep mathematics and you're actually trying to drive at a specific insight or something, this is something that I think cannot be shortcut, right? If the model can only operate, I think, on things that are already known, if that makes sense. Like it would just be very strange, I think, if an AI came out with a truly unique, never thought of concept and was able to generate that for you, despite how good you might think you are at prompting AI. If it did, I think that would be really great evidence of actual general intelligence or something like that, or creative intelligence. But I don't think AI can do that. And I think that often when people start to become over-reliant on AI, their ideas become more and more derivative, right? And simply because the AI is keeping them, bottlenecked inside of what's already known. And I think that it was one of the things I used to tell my PhD students was that really, like, there was an old graphic that someone drew in a magazine, which was like, if you draw a circle that represents like all human knowledge, right? Your thesis is just this tiny little bit right on the edge that's going to like bulge that out a little bit. And I think that is something that requires creativity and insight that an AI cannot yet produce. And so if you are relying on that kind of automation, you're only operating inside that circle, and so you're not doing actual, it's not research in the traditional sense. You might be writing a review or reorganizing what's already known or something like that. But unless society or civilization now knows something that it didn't before, then your research question wasn't well phrased, if that makes sense.
And also, I think this very much connects to the conversation about rigor that we had before. So ultimately, what you can automate is processes or things that you trust, in the sense that you can either replicate, so like you can do them yourselves because you trust yourself that you can validate the solution, or you can trust the person who did it, which again connects back to academia, where you basically just reference a paper or reference a methodology and say, I trust this person, many people trust this person because this is something that has been approved and validated. And this is ultimately what you are allowed to do. And if you are within this framework, then you can automate in between. So it's okay to use AI to find proper methodologies, or it's okay to find proper literature and to do research for you in the sense of like collecting information. But then it gets back to a step where you would say, now it's my responsibility as the operator of this AI to really make sure that what I am parsing now, or what I'm deriving from this suggested solutions, is really, gets my stamp of approval. And this is basically the difference, whether your research is qualitative or not.
I just quickly point out as well that there's actually a really amazing parallel when at any time a system that is good at organizing information is released, there's an extreme moral panic about it, right? When search engines were released, it's like, oh my God, everyone's just using Wikipedia and now they're all going to become idiots. And we're like, even spell checkers, right? The moral panic, like, wow, no one's going to learn how to read it, like, or just normal, word processing stuff. People are like, yeah, okay, handwriting probably did get really bad, but literacy has gone nothing but up. I think that when resources like Scopus in science, right, and Web of Science and Reaxis for chemistry and SciFinder Scholar and all these kinds of things came out, people were like, wow, the scholarship is going to go down the drain. But the reverse happened, right? The people got really, really good at finding, exactly the articles that they wanted, whereas if you had to go through an entire library shelf looking for stuff, of course you're going to miss it. I think that AI is having that same sort of impact on people now, where they're like, wow, like, people are going to get so complacent and everyone's going to be a moron this time in 10 years or something like that. I don't think it's true. I do think it's going to automate the stuff that it can automate, but we're still in that Gartner height cycle thing that I was speaking about before. I think people have dramatically overestimated what AI is good at and have dramatically underestimated how far we are from like that trough of disillusionment is what they call it. But it's, I think that we will be looking back on, this era of AI and laughing about what people were saying about it, the same way that we laugh about those microcomputers that people were going to inject into our bloodstreams or something. You know, like it's okay to recognize the moral panic about it. I think the slop inference that people make about it is also justified, but it is extremely useful in certain contexts, and the trick is finding the context where it works well.
And maybe observation from our sourcing process when we reviewed the applications we received for TERSE. And I mean, I would say there's a crowd of maybe, I don't know, 500 people who are applying to every single crypto conference everywhere, and think they have a good understanding of the level of quality and also the hype topics to submit. And for us, I guess like everywhere else, we had, I would say, 90%, let's say, mid-level, present everywhere content. And for us, it was not super hard to detect or to decide and select the topics of today. I would say, due to all the slop created, it's even easier, because slop can now be handed in by everyone, right? You don't even, these 500 mid-level quality people are not outstanding anymore. It's rather, I feel, the real good stuff is shining even brighter, because, yeah, it differs.
All right, yeah, it was a good closure of the day, I would guess. So yeah, thanks everybody for coming. Also, thanks for the speakers today for the shining out contributions to today. All the researcher here, right? If you have friends, right? We talked about the journal. So also for future editions, I guess it would be good to reach out. All token engineers with something to contribute to the toolbox for tomorrow's problems, come to the breakout session tomorrow. Yeah, did I forget anything to announce, Angela? Any last words for the day? Wrapping it up.
Just follow us on Talk Engineering on Twitter, and stay tuned for the proceedings for the first journal. And see you next time, live or digital. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, I was late.